Hello everyone and welcome back to 4 Kilobyte Shorts. Let's learn! Yay, another one! Let's learn with Kerbal Space Program 0.18.2. And I note the actual pointage of the numbers because things may change in the future. And this is a semi-special Let's Learn. This one is Let's Learn How to Fly in KSP. Not fly a plane, mind you, we are going to be flying a shuttle ship thing. Someone has said, well, how do you fly? I don't understand how to fly. We need to fly. Or at least they said, they did ask, they're like, can you please teach us how to fly? For those of us who may not know. So that's what I'm going to do. So this is our Let's Learn. So most likely, it is a different profile. So most likely our pilot will be Jebediah, which is awesome. We have a parachute. Parachutes are awesome. Now, to start, you need to know where you're going. Because knowing where you're going is half the flight. Little G.I. Joe thing there for everybody. Knowing where you're going is basically denotes what kind of shuttle, what kind of ship you're going to have. Now for this Let's Learn, we're going to fly to the moon. It's very basic, flying to the moon. It requires 3 things that everybody really wants to know how to do, which is of course taking off, getting into a stable orbit, and then leaving that orbit to another orbital body, including orbital maneuvers. So I'm going to include all that. So what you need first is you need to build your rocket backwards. So you don't build it like I'm going to the moon, so I need this rocket and this rocket and this engine. No. You say, where will I be when I'm done? Where's the last place I'm going to touch down? So if you're going to land on the moon, you need to build a moon lander. If you're going to go to the moon and come back, you need to build a planet lander. So things like parachutes are determined whether or not you're landing on a planet or a moon with an atmosphere. You don't need a parachute if you're landing in a vacuum. It's just a waste of weight. Since we will be coming back to Kerbin, we're going to have a parachute. Once that's done, you have to figure out, well, what am I going to be bringing back with me? Well, since Kerbin has the thickest atmosphere, and we already know that this and this will work in this atmosphere, anything attached to this isn't needed. All this below this isn't needed to come back down, so we put a decoupler. And then from there, the rest is easy. What we want to do is we want something to go to the moon, orbit the moon, or at least go around the moon, then come back. Since this is super light, and we're going to say how super light it is, I am not taking the protractor mod with me, just so everybody knows. Protractors for bodies way out in space. It is not for something up close and personal. Actually, we're not going to put MechJeb on here. We're going to put MechJeb on the engine. We're going to use this fuel tank. Okay, so our actual lander, or our lander itself is probably super duper light. Whatever this is, let's take a look. It is 0.8, so that's roughly 1 ton plus whatever the parachute is. So we'll say 1 ton even. So our current rocket is 3.23, but we need a thruster. Okay, now thruster weight ratio changes. This is thruster weight ratio in 1 gravity. What that means is the engine I have can currently lift 1.41 of whatever it's attached to. So what that means is if I have a pardon me, if I have a thruster weight ratio below 1, it won't get off the ground because it can't lift even 1 of what's attached to it. 2 means you can lift 2, and 3 means you can lift 3. Now, I said this in a very early KSP 0.17 thing. I think it was a Let's Learn actually, that the shuttle has a thruster weight ratio of 3.0. So the shuttle from Earth can be lifted into orbit with a 3 surface to weight ratio. So I try to get my surface to weight ratio at 3. Or around 3. It can be a little bit lower. Higher is better, but probably less efficient. But around 3. Now, this is all MechJeb stuff. If you don't use MechJeb, you're going to have to eyeball it. You're just going to have to try it out, eyeball it, see what happens, see how it goes. I use MechJeb so I don't have to eyeball it. So what I have here is I have a surface to weight ratio of 1.41, which on Kerbin isn't that great, but off Kerbin is huge. Look at that, 3,070 meters a second, which means with this little rocket, I could almost burn, with 3,070 meters, I can burn all the way to Duna. I could probably burn all the way to Dres. And I could burn roughly halfway to Joule with this little rocket once it's in orbit. If I got this in orbit, I could burn really far with that. Now that's to that planet. With Duna, I could actually come out of down my speed and go into orbit, and I may be even able to land. With Dres, maybe not so much. With Joule, since I couldn't even actually make it to Joule, probably not. So these are all, you know, this number right here, this is the number you're looking for, because it will kind of change depending on what rocket you have. So 3,070 meters a second, that works really, really well. Now your second stage. Now this is a stage here that we're working with, not a stage like this, but a complete stage. This is going to be the rocket that comes back to Kerbin. And there's so much delta V, we probably wouldn't even need this one, but I like to overcompensate a little bit. So we could use this little one. We could take this off like this. Not that one. And we can use this. What's that give us? Oh, we took MechJev off too. It gives us nothing, it gives us no data. We'll put MechJev on this one too as well. So 1,954 at a surface to rate ratio of 2. So because I'm taking slightly less fuel, I get a slightly better surface to rate ratio because I'm slightly lighter, but I also get less burn. But in 1954 meters a second, this is probably enough to even do what we want. Because like I said, I tend to overcompensate. So let's take this smaller rocket. Now from here, we need our next stage. And what's our next stage going to be? Well, our next stage is going to be our orbital stage. It's going to be our get to orbit and get out of orbit stage. Because like I said, I do want to save this rocket for our return trip. So if it's our once we are in orbit stage, you know what? I'm forgetting things. Just because, we're going to go ahead and put a couple solar panels on here, because that is important. And this extra stuff is stuff you absolutely will need. It's not 100% important stuff, but it's just stuff that you'll need. So we'll go ahead and put some, we'll leave that like that. Jeb doesn't require any, or doesn't create any lag or anything, so we'll do that, and then we'll just put a couple, oh, those ones are big, excuse me. Someone added big solar panels, so there you go. You know, just put a couple solar panels on there just because, just for fun, just for shizzies and giggles. So, you know, you do have to put those things on, things that you need. I tend to forget them sometimes because they are new to 0.18, but once you remember, and you can put redundant systems, like I could add a battery or whatever, but we won't be out of the sun's light for too long, so the solar panels are all we really need. Now from here, we go to our next stage, and of course our next stage is our orbital stage, our get into orbit / get out of orbit. And what I mean by that is I tend to have rockets that are a little light in the get into orbit stage, so I usually have to burn a little bit of this tank to get into orbit, and then the rest of it to get out of orbit to push me towards whatever orbital body I need. For this one, I like to use these. And this is a super light rocket, so you know you only have to use these. Now if you notice, our thrust to rate ratio is 0 because Jeb can't calculate without an engine, but our tonnage has gone up and our burn has gone down. Not good. But since we are going into orbit, we could probably use one of these, see what that shows. 0.67 with 2862 meters a second. That engine's not good enough. This is a thrust vectoring rocket, very good for maneuvering, kind of what we need. So we have 2273 with a surface to rate ratio of 2.37. Awesome, that's actually pretty good. I like both of these. So this is going to be our get into orbit, get out of orbit stage. Now we have to go to our next stage, which is our taking off from the planet stage. Because remember, we are doing this in reverse. We're not doing this like we're supposed to. We're doing it backwards. So our get into orbit stage will be the next one. Now this is the one where you have to be careful. Because you don't know how many stages you're going to need dependent on your weight. So we are at 13 tons. We're going to kind of kick this up a notch and go 2, like that. We want a really fast rocket in the middle. This has no thrust vectoring and it burns a ton of fuel. But we don't care about that. Now that gives us a thrust to rate ratio of 1.16, which is absolutely not enough to get to where we need to go. And that is where the wonderful asparagus system comes in. That's this thing. Now, I don't know if you guys want to see me put this together. I've tried to explain it before. It takes a really long time to put together. I think I will put it together off camera so I'm not wasting time, and then explain it to you guys back on camera so that you know what the hell I'm doing. By the way, those are 6 thrust vectoring rockets, so we can steer. So I'm going to put this together off camera, and then I will explain it when we get back on camera, and I will be right back. Okay everyone, here we are. This is an asparagus system brought to me by Jeff Major and brought to him by someone on the KSP forums, I believe. Basically what you have is you have an S-curve, which means your fuel tanks are going like this. And the reason for that is you have 2 tanks, this tank and this one, and then this tank and this one, and this tank and this one. And what this does is it funnels basically all the fuel out of these outside tanks first. So it drains the fuel out of these, then the fuel out of these, and then the fuel out of these, and then the fuel out of the center one. So all the engines are running, but as the engines are running, you dump them. So like these tanks empty, you dump them, and so on and so forth all the way around in pairs. That's what you can see when I'm launching. I'll drop engines in pairs, and that's what you're doing. Now what that does is as your fuel goes down, as your fuel level goes down, your weight goes down, your surface to weight ratio goes up, and then when your engines kick out, because the engine will no longer work without fuel directly above it, you just dump all that crap, and that's garbage you don't need, and then you can fly higher. MechJeb calculates this according to your stages. So you have 573 meters a second for 21, 29, 47, and then stage 6 is our actual good rocket. Speaking of which, I need to set this up more proper. Like this, I believe, and then that one is... that one, okay. So basically what MechJeb is telling me is that these first two engines will be dumped, which are these two engines, yeah, this engine and the one across it, will be dumped after 21 seconds. But what you don't realize is MechJeb can't calculate for this right now, is that as you go up, these numbers will increase because this weight ratio will go up and this tonnage will go down. So it's a great system for flying what initially starts out as a heavy rocket up into the sky as a lighter rocket. And that's what the asparagus system is. So this is what we're going to try to take to the moon and back again. It's semi-light. It's actually probably much heavier than what we really need, because a rocket like this, I think, got us to almost to Duna. So this rocket might actually be too hefty for what we're doing, but it's a very generic, very basic rocket that I like to build a lot. And we don't have any RCS on there. You can use it for orbital maneuvers and docking. Once again, you have to know what it is you're actually wanting to do, since we won't be doing any orbital maneuvers or docking. We won't need any RCS or anything. What we will need, of course, are docking clamps for the purpose of getting out into space, or at least launching off the platform without blowing up. And so let's get this thing out onto the launch pad, and I'll demonstrate what happens out there. So I'll see you guys there. Okay, everybody, here we are outside. At this point, all you want to do is just make sure all of your stages are currently correct. I've been getting better at doing that inside the bay, because it's better than hitting your spacebar only to find out that you need to very quickly switch these up before you explode. Sometimes you'll still make a mistake. It happens. Don't worry about it. Now, MechJeb will tell you all the information you need, such as your current altitude, pitch, roll, heading, whatever, and then all this stuff. So I'm going to use this instead of the map screen. The map screen works just as well, but this gives you all of your data on one screen without you having to go back and forth, like so. Now because of that, let's go ahead and map out. Because of that, what I'd like to do is explain a little bit about what we're going to do. Now we're going to the moon, which may not be visible right now, and that's okay. But since we're going to the moon, we need to know which way we want to go. You have 270, I believe, degrees over here, and 90 degrees over here. What that is that's 270 and 90 degrees based on north and south. The reason you go with 90 degrees is 90 degrees puts you in an equatorial orbit, a tilt orbit along an equatorial and 90 degree path along the orbit of Kerbal. Now, what you want to do is, if you want to go in, so for that's like going out, because you're speeding up away from the planet. That's for going out to Duna and Jool and things like that. Now, if you want to go in, if you want to go into other planets, it's more efficient. You don't have to do this, but it's more efficient to do a 270 degree orbital burn, which will basically make you go opposite Kerbal, which will slow you down in comparison to like everything else. And that will allow you to burn in to Moho and Eve. It's really complicated, it's really weird, it's not a requirement, but it's very, very helpful. Now, to do an orbital burn, and we're going to go ahead and launch because I think we're all set up. To do an orbital burn, there's some maneuvers you have to do as you go up, which makes it more efficient, but are not 100% required. And I'll show you how to do that as we go up. So we launch first. Okay, what we don't do is we don't launch without actually igniting our engines. So let's go ahead and restart that, because I was so busy talking I completely forgot to throttle up. Totally my fault. Sorry about that, Jebediah, who's like, what the hell, man? Even I'm not that bad. Yeah. Okay, so the first thing you do, as I'm sure you all know, and that I completely failed to do, is you throttle up. On these smaller engines, max throttle works. Bigger engines, you want to go to 3/4 so they don't overheat, and that's just a mechanical thing, has nothing to do with actually flying. So here we go. Now this part of the flight is actually really boring, but what you want to watch is if you see these two engines, those are from my first two drop pods because they're draining first. So once they're drained, which is going to happen here in about a second or two, space to stage, and there go those engines. Now if you notice, if you watch my thrust to weight ratio, it will fluctuate. It'll go up as I use fuel but keep engines burning, and it'll go down suddenly as I drop engines or engines no longer function. But the farther you get away from a gravitational object such as Kerbal, the higher your thrust to rate ratio goes. Like if you notice, surface is 2.7, but my current is 2.8. Once you're off the ground, your current is what you want to pay attention to more than your surface. Okay, two more engines gone. Once again, thrust to rate went way down, but now it's going back up because I'm burning out fuel. Okay, now at about 9,000 meters, that's what I choose, that's what I was taught. You want to start rolling over to your chosen degrees. If you want to go to a north-south orbit, you go at 0 degrees, which is north, or 180, which is south, either one. But you want to tilt to the first ring, and that's just for efficiency's sake. If you were to tilt out this way, you'd no longer be going up, you'd be going over. If you're pointing straight up, you're not going over, you're just going up. So the first ring at 90 degrees, where it says 90, is about where you want your rocket to be pointing. Now at this point, since we're tilted over, we want to pay attention to our apoapsis here, which is basically where our highest point is going to be for our orbit, which I'm sure most of you know. Oh, dead rockets, get out of here, don't need you. Okay, now I've just lost my thrust vectoring engines, and I'm going on my main engine, which has a very little thrust to weight ratio, unfortunately. But we are still gaining speed, so you got to pay attention to all these numbers. It's very important to pay attention to all your numbers to know where you're going. But if you notice, my actual thrust, even though I am going 575, isn't up anymore, it's more over. That will help with our orbital burn later, but kind of hurts us when it comes to getting out of the atmosphere, so we have to compensate for that a little bit by tilting farther up. So now we're burning up, but we're moving over. So this is where our rocket's actually heading. This is where our nose is pointed. Okay, we're at 37, 38,000. We have more than enough fuel for this to do what we want. But it's going to take a little while because it is a super duper light rocket. Okay, now we're technically in orbit. So it switched from our surface speed, which was 700 and something, to our orbital speed, which is now like at 1,000 and something. Our apoapsis may start going up a little bit faster, but there's no guarantee of that. Now, I really don't have to worry about this rocket here, because remember, this is our get out of orbit rocket, but it's also our kind of get into orbit rocket. So this is just our get out into space rocket at this point. 65, we do want that higher. 70,000 is a safe zone. Anything lower than that, and you're starting to hit atmosphere, but 100,000 is pretty efficient. Like anything, like I said, the farther you are away from an orbital body, the higher this number gets, and the higher this number gets, the less fuel you have to use. 100,000 is about average. It's about right. It's what I was taught, I guess. It's what other Let's Players that I watch got to. So it's what I go to. So it's 100,000, but 200,000 is better, 300,000 better, 400, so on, so on, 500,000 to a million. Super awesome when it comes to fuel consumption. Now, once in the map screen, what you want to do, so you want to left click, of course, add a maneuver, and then to get your orbit, you just want to burn towards your prograde. Now Jeb can do this too, but since not everyone uses mechanical Jeb, it's always important to know how to do this. If you don't know how to do this and you want to just do your best to do it manually, basically just burn towards your... Actually, that wasn't bad. Basically just burn towards this when this stops going up. That's all you really have to do, because this will slowly increase until it reaches the horizon line. And once that has happened, you just slam on the gas and watch your map screen. This just gives us the ability to do that without having to watch our map screen. Totally awesome. Okay, we're going to burn in 55 seconds. So let's go ahead and do that. And Jeb's very happy up here. Now, according to Mech Jeb, we only have 509 meters a second in our big tank. But we have 2,237 in our middle tank, our get to the moon tank. And because of that, we have more than enough to get into orbit and then get to the moon. So we start our orbital burn, and this is just to basically lock our position, because once you're in orbit, Everything after that is easy. You don't have to worry about falling back down to the planet. You don't have to worry about anything going wrong. You can basically fly around Kerbin until, you know, your Kerbal actually rots and dies. Not that that ever happens. Okay, a few seconds left in that burn. And then gone, and then, whoa, I guess I nuked it. Alright, now that I'm lighter, and I'm using a slightly lighter engine with thrust vectoring, I will be slightly more maneuverable, so I have to be very careful about how I maneuver. If I maneuver too much, I could easily throw myself off. Alright, and we're coming up on our point. Slow down a little bit. And... oh, okay, burn too far. Lock ourselves in because I'm not using any SAS. And then once you're done with your orbit, go ahead and clear that, but then take a look at where you're going. So we're at 80,000 high enough, 143,000, so our orbit's a little off. It's never perfect. I've never been able to get 100% perfect orbit, but as long as you're above your atmosphere on one side and the other, you're fine. Looks like we have some Let's Learn debris hanging out there. It shouldn't bother us. It's behind us. So yeah, this is an okay orbit, not great. Now once that's done, let's center on the Kerbin. Now to do that, you double right click, just so everybody knows. I don't know if I've mentioned that before. Double right clicking now on an orbital body makes making orbital maneuvers and finding out your location so much easier. Okay, there's the moon. Now making a target, making a planet or something your target makes it easier to see, but any intercept of that target will still show up even if it's not your target. But left click and set as target. Now what this does is this gives you ascending node and descending node. Basically these are your closest points to the target you've selected. So at one point this is a descending node. I guess that means that's when it's coming towards you, and this is when it's going away from you. I think that's what it means. So basically these are your closest points. It will never be closer to you than these 2 points. Now if I had our protractor mod, it would tell me exactly where to burn, but this is an easy burn. So what we're going to do is we're just going to practice a little bit, and what you do is you just start a burn. Now when you get this, target at closest approach, and closest approach, this is where I will be, this is where the moon will be. That's what that means. Where you will be, where your target will be. That means that we will not be anywhere near our target. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Almost a perfect burn, first try. Let's see how that works. That gives us 640,000. I can live with 640,000. Get closer. Oh, that's too close. 197,000. That's even better. So yeah, an easy burn. Once again, you just click, add maneuver, and then throttle up, and then you drive this around until you get an intercept. Now what this means is once we get past that point, we will be thrown out into space after 3 days, 5 hours, 18 minutes. I don't really worry about that part. Usually I want to orbit the body, so I don't want to get thrown out into space. And because of that, in 8 minutes, we're going to burn towards the moon. So to do that, we need to get in a position. Whoop. Which I guess is directly at Kerbin. That will change, of course, because this blue dot moves with us. So what we do is we put our nose right on it, and then we speed up time. And it looks like we got a white dot down there. Not even sure what that is. Or was. That was weird. Oh well, it's gone now, no one cares. Okay, gotta speed this up a little bit more. 3, 2, the moon should be actually be coming over the horizon, maybe. Alright, and our nose is a little off now. Let's bring our nose back down where it belongs. Okay. Five seconds, and then we just start our burner and say it's going to be an 822 meter per second burn. Perfect. That's going to give us tons of fuel to come back. Alright, we'll just burn as straight and as nice as possible. Now this will never be exactly right. Any micro adjustment, like the ones you see me currently making because I can't keep a rocket straight to save my life, any micro adjustments like that can alter where you end up by hundreds of thousands of meters. Hundreds of thousands of meters. The farther out you're going, and the more those little micro adjustments occur, you could be going billions of meters off course. So it's never 100% perfect. And to get it 100% perfect, you'd have to like fly around like this, and then you'd have to burn a little bit towards it. Like you always have to burn towards this blue thing. So you go like this, but if you notice, it still moves because I can't get 100%. So you never ever want to have to worry about 100%, because even then, see, I overshot, I overburned. Don't know where my orbit's going to be. But there's the moon, and we're going to intercept the moon. So before we do that, let's stop our rotation and let's check our map. So it looks like our actual periapsis is going to be 92,000, but because of the wonkiness of the orientation, the map system has gone whack job. We're a little bit high, I think, is one of the issues, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that so much. We have just created an intercept with the moon, so let's go ahead and speed up time again. And you just kind of, when you're out here, you want to kind of keep an eye on your target. You really don't want to be doing it the way I am, because you can easily shoot past something at 1 billion miles an hour without even realizing you've done it. Alright, we don't want to be on Kerbal anymore, so we double click on ourselves. Alright, here we go. Now, once you get to your orbital body, you want to wait until the moment you are captured, like the instant you're captured. It doesn't matter how many days it's going to take you to actually pass by the object. You want to start setting up your burn as soon as possible, so any corrections you may need to make will be easily made. Alright, so we want to center on the moon, makes our lives easier. And we just want to deorbit burn. Once again, periapsis is the best place to put your deorbit burns. I don't know why that is, something scientific, I'm sure. Alright, we just go like this, we'll say, however circularized the orbit can be, 217 by, what, 92? It's gonna be kind of close, 270 meter per second burn. We're just gonna fiddle with it a little bit, because that's what we do. And you don't have to do any of that fiddling stuff if you don't want to. That's basically around orbit. Alright, we seem to have flipped. Yes, our camera has flipped. Once again, you want to... hello. There it is. You want to keep an eye on your target. Once again, this is the direction we're heading, the one without the X. If it has an X, that's the opposite of your heading. That's where your ass is pointed. Or at least where your anti-speed. If you want to call it that, that's your anti-speed. Because that may not be where your ass is pointed, but that's the way you're not going. That's the one with the X, means that's the opposite of the direction you're currently heading. Sometimes you have to burn towards that, sometimes you don't. With this new system, you have to burn towards the little blue dot is your most efficient burn. That's what that means. That's your most efficient burn. It doesn't mean it's your only option. It just means it's your most efficient option, which is why every once in a while everyone will see me try to correct it. Of course, when I try to correct it, I usually screw it up. But it's an option. If you don't feel that the system in question is doing its job properly, you can always fix it. Yay, Eclipse. Love Eclipse. Okay. 18 minutes. More than enough fuel to do what we want, which is wonderful. Now, if you look out here, if you saw, our current thrust-to-weight ratio was really, really high, but now that we're getting closer to an orbital body, it's gone really, 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 really low. But it's not as low as it would be on Kerbal, which is 1, or less than 1. Now, our surface-to-weight ratio on the moon is 20. So basically, this rocket that I'm currently carrying with all the weight above it, it could carry 20 of those from the moon. Or at least that's what a 1-to-1 ratio would be for thrust versus weight, would be 1. So yeah, that thrust-to-weight ratio that you see on Kerbal, just try to get it above 3. Above or around 3. Anything higher or lower than that, or excuse me, anything higher than that is probably a little bit inefficient. But any fuel you can take into orbit with you is fuel you can use. And then anything below that is probably not going to get you as far as you want to go, and you're going to end up having to dock or refuel, or your ship's going to crash back down or be in a really low, crappy orbit. So not super fun. Alright. So here's the moon. We are now in orbit around the moon. I'm not going to try to land on the moon. It takes too much work. I don't have any landing gear, and that was not the purpose of this. We were supposed to orbit the moon and then come back. So here we are, orbiting the moon, just with our deorbit burn. I didn't check my numbers, but I don't really have to. I'm pretty sure I got it so close that it doesn't matter. 91 by 95. Awesome. Now when it comes to orbital maneuvers, like straightening this out, which would probably be better than not, the farther out you are, the better you are. So if I had been here and my outer orbit was here, I would have waited till here to like twist. to make this go like more flat or to do whatever orbital maneuvers I need, because once again, it comes down to the thrust to weight ratio. The higher this number, the less delta V you have to use to do what you want to do. But we're not going to worry about that. What we are going to worry about is getting back to Kerbin. And it's actually kind of difficult to get back to Kerbin, if only because you're burning in a really odd way. Like this. Okay, that makes our Kerbin periapsis, what, 2 million? Oh, 1 million. Can we slow it down? No, slowing it down is bad, so we actually have to speed up. Now basically what we're doing is we're reversing our orbit. I know that sounds weird, but we're basically forcing ourselves against orbit. We'll adjust that, make it look better. Make it look nicer, right? Oh, there we go. That's a crash landing on Kerbin right there. I don't think we want to orbit. We can. What's our burn time? 354. Let's see if we can back that up a little bit. Oh, 388. Bring that down. Whoa, 1,000, that's way too much. Okay, yeah, it takes little micro adjustments here and there. 123, okay, that's around 100,000. So what we're going to do is basically we're going to slow ourselves down so Kerbin catches us. Yep. And we're going to do that in 32 minutes. That's going to be a 307 meter per second burn, which is great because that means we're going to have already overcompensated with the amount of fuel we need. This whole little stage here isn't even going to be needed. Nope, not even a little bit. So let's go ahead and do this. But like I've always said, or at least I've recently started saying since I played Kerbal Space Program, it is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it, which is a phrase made famous by the movie Lonesome Dove. And if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a good film. It's like 3 hours long. It's really confusing, but it's kind of awesome. And it's in the Old West, but it's not about gunfights. And I'll stop talking about it right now. So in 1 minute, we'll go ahead and do our burn. So there was the moon, a nice little orbital trip around the moon. We didn't orbit the moon or anything, we just kind of did an orbital trip around it to come back. That was not a free return trip because we are burning our way back. A free return trip is slightly different. That's what they did with Apollo 13. Don't know how it works, I'm not a scientist or an orbital ops person. All I know is that you can go around and then come back, and apparently you can do so even without thrust. At least with our moon. I don't know if you can do it with the moon, like Kerbal moon or not. So this is not a free return trip because, as I said, we are powering the return, but better that than the alternative. Okay, close enough to what we wanted. So basically what we told ourselves is we were going to start going slower than the moon, which means Kerbin's going to grab us and yank us back down. And what that looks like is, actually, let's do it from out here. There's the moon. We're going to fly, and the moon's basically going to fly past us. And once again, current thrust to weight ratio going up. So if I wanted to make micro adjustments to my orbit, it would be best to do it out here. Alright, and there's Kerbin. And at some point the moon will let us go, so our camera will switch. Oh, here you go. Now let the moon see. The moon's leaving. Bye-bye, moon. And we're going this way. We're actually flying in the opposite direction that we wanted to go. Now what happens is, if you notice, this is our moon escape. So once this meets, like, I think this line here, it's either this line here or somewhere around in there, that's when we'll be caught by Kerbin. Yeah, there it goes. Oop, and there it is. So now we'll be coming in on this side of Kerbin towards 118 meter orbit. Now if I wanted to burn down, and I didn't care where I was going to land, I could burn from here and just hit atmosphere. But we're actually going to use this fuel here to deorbit this all the way back to there, which is not very efficient, but is very fun. So where's Kerbin? Kerbin should be this way. Ah, there it is. So let's burn our, move our happy way back. Whee! Jebediah is so happy. He's like, I got to go to the moon, look around, look at me. Alright, we're coming in. I guess I should, like, slow down and start doing our deorbit stuff. Since we're not going to be captured, we're already captured. So we'll drop back onto Kerbin. Once again, at our periapsis, we'll add a maneuver and we can just... I got 448. Won't have enough in that big tank, but we will have enough in our little tank. So what, 448, 328, okay. Ooh, it's going to cost 600. Yeah, see, it's expensive. Expensive via fuel. 200 versus 118, still not high enough. low enough, whatever, there it is. There it is, that'll be, once it flips, that's when you've realized you've gone too far, or at least far enough. So we'll turn ourselves around. Like so. And we're waiting 12 minutes. Whoa, sunlight across the water. And apparently, oh yeah, it's sunlight across the water. Little glitches like that really creep me out. They're not glitches, they're just not rendering properly, and that may be my system versus the actual game. But you get shadow glitches and stuff like that. It's not terrible, but can get kind of disconcerting. Okay, we're on the dark side of the planet, so we can't see anything. Maybe, ah, there we go, see some stars. Oop. Time is still sped up, and we only got like 10 seconds left. Alright, now we are going to wait till our burn is over. 9. We can do it anytime we want to. Periapsis is of course most efficient, but not really that concerning or important. Now check out our thrust to rate ratio. It's 6.16, gone. 2.80 because of this tiny, very maneuverable rocket. Yeah, super maneuverable rocket. So it's very good that we brought this with us for our deorbit burn here on Kerbal. Probably wouldn't have done us any good if we'd used up all our fuel over on the moon, but this works. You can hear me probably clicking my keys really hard trying to keep this thing roughly straight. This is where advanced SAS really comes in handy if you want to control a tiny, tiny rocket. The only problem I have with advanced SAS, of course, is the fact that it will eat up all of your fuel without telling you, which I've had happen before. Okay, our deorbit burn is going to be a little close, but we can have some fun with this, actually. Yeah, a lot of fun with this. Let's do this. Let's do a controlled descent. Now what you're doing here is you're actually fighting the curve of Kerbal along with atmosphere. So atmosphere will slow you down, but we're actually traveling with the curve of the planet, or with the orbit of the planet. So as you see, we're not going to land anywhere near where my initial setup was. We're actually going to land really, 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 really short. Now in this case, when you're deorbit burning, or burning to the point where you're going to come crashing down, it matters much less where your deorbit location is at. It is less efficient to do it this way, but not so detrimental as to be a problem. Alright, we're coming up on the burn in 2 minutes. Probably not. We'll probably be a little bit farther out, but I don't need to get this perfect to get it right. So let's go back inside, and we're going to land on the dark side apparently. That's okay. It's going to be an 848.9 meter a second burn, which is roughly what we have left, which isn't bad, I suppose. Alright. And we'll start burning now just for fun. Alright. Yeah, once again I'm fighting a little rocket because I can't seem to keep it, I can't keep my hands off of it for some reason. I'm constantly having to adjust, even when there's nothing to adjust. Oh. Micro adjustments. As long as I'm roughly even with the burn time, it doesn't really matter where I'm coming from, so I'm okay with it. Oh, lost it a little bit. Oh, we're burning too much now. Yeah, it's gonna get us a little low, I think. Actually, we could probably bring it in a little bit more. Let's see where that gets us. And well, let's just burn the rest of our fuel out. Done. We're gonna get rid of it anyway, right? Alright, so that's done. So I guess we can do that. Bye-bye. Now we're light enough to separate, so those shouldn't hit us at all. Let's just get ourselves let's get ourselves in a respectable location. Oh, can't do that while throttled up. Okay, that's fine. When you hit atmosphere, depending on how your ship is shaped, it will change your trajectory a little bit, but that's okay. Like this one is designed to come in flat, so it'll always try to point in this direction. I've had ships that are pointy on one end, so they try to come in on the pointy end, like an airplane would. It's totally up to your ship design. There's really no way to fix that. Now, since we don't have to worry about burn physics right now, I'm not going to be concerned with that. Normally, like I would be. Yeah, see, I'm starting to line up with my descent because the air is actually holding on to us. Alright, that's 20,000. 18. I guess I could launch my parachute at any point. The atmosphere is thick enough, so that'll slow us way down. Yeah, I went from 700. Hey, look how close we are. 13 kilometers. That's not bad. Somebody could just take a rowboat out and pick us up. And there goes our debris. Bye-bye, debris. And this is kind of a boring part, I'm afraid, because you are just waiting for everything to slow down and to open up and to do its thing. Usually, I don't come back to Kerbin. It's a very rare experience. Oh, look, there's the moon. We were just there like 5 minutes ago. Ah, moon, how's it going? Yeah, usually I don't come back to Kerbin. I usually take a Kerbal out and then I leave them wherever they go. Kind of mean of me, but that's how it works. But for Let's Learn, I figured that going around the moon and then coming back to Kerbin would probably be the best way to teach people how to fly. Really, a lot of people are saying, well, I get a rocket into orbit and then it gets stuck there. And it's like, well, it sounds like you have a fuel issue. It sounds like you're not putting enough fuel on, or alternatively, you're putting on too much fuel, because it's a return on investment kind of thing. Basically, what it is you have a lot of fuel and a lot of thrust, but basically all you're thrusting into orbit is your fuel. You're no longer lifting a rocket, you're now lifting a bunch of fuel tanks into orbit. If you have a bunch of empty fuel tanks when you get up there, you're carrying dead weight. You need to get rid of that. If you have like no fuel left and you find you need to dock every time, then that means you're carrying too much weight and not enough thrust to weight ratio. If you're not getting into orbit at all, or if you're flying out to a place like, say, Jool or the moon or wherever else, and all you can do is get into orbit and then you get stuck, you're having a fuel issue at that point. If you notice, I overcompensated a little bit, and we had just enough fuel to land. Had we landed on the moon, we would not have had enough fuel to come back and land. Or at least not have a controlled landing like you're currently seeing. It would have been a deorbit, then hope we hit something nice landing. So it is better to overcompensate, but not to take the big orange tanks. I know those big orange tanks are like really tempting, like, wow, big orange tanks, but really, they're just there to carry big loads into space. Because a rocket carrying those tanks can go from like 50 tons to 350 tons just with the fuel in those tanks. So yeah, if you're having problems getting into orbit, if you're having problems like with your ship not lasting as long as it should, just take a look at it and think maybe less is more. In this case, Jebediah is now content. He's like, yeah, I went to the moon, came back, I'm cool. In this case, if you notice, that teeny tiny rocket got us all the way to the moon and back. Had I created a lander that wasn't supposed to come back, it would have increased the weight a little bit with all the landing parts. But I mean, I would have had to leave fuel in orbit around the moon because we wouldn't have needed it to land. So yeah, it's all about determining how much you need, and depending on where you're going. If you're going to Jool, roughly 6,000 meters a second on a perfect burn, which means when Jool is where it's supposed to be. If you're going to the moon, as you saw, it took us about, what, 800 to 1,000? And that's only because of the amount of gravity we were coping with. With Duna, it takes about 1,000, I think, depending on the size of the rocket. For the last two things that I sent to Duna, it only took 1,000. So yeah, you really have to decide where you're going and what you're going to do. And you can deviate, like the time I was doing the Let's Learn of the Ant, and I went to try to go to Moho, and I failed at it, and I was able to compensate and go to Eve instead. You can do that, but it's very hard. It's very hard. I actually didn't have enough fuel to do what I needed to do, so we barely landed on Gilly. So yeah, you just have to kind of figure that part out. So I would like to thank you all for joining me for Kilobyte Short and Jebediah, our wonderful pilot, on this Let's Learn on flying with Kerbal Space Program. And I will see you next video.